What's up guys, I'm BTC. Symmetra just got her second rework, and this time the character was changed far more dramatically than the first time she got a rework. So today I'm going to show you everything you need to know about the new Symmetra 3.0. The first thing I need to emphasize is that the character shouldn't be treated like it's a simple rework. Symmetra 3.0 is effectively a brand new character. While the appearance remains the same, all of the attacks and the abilities are almost completely different from the previous versions. This means that most or all of the experience you had on the older versions of Symmetra will not really carry over to the new version. In fact, some of it might actually hold you back from using the new version of the character. So the best thing is to just forget everything you knew about the old character and start fresh. Let's take a look at her attacks and abilities. Her primary attack no longer has any lock-on function and instead behaves a lot more like Zarya's primary attack. It has a 10-meter range and damage will now ramp up every 2 seconds during an attack. The damage increments are 60, 120, and 180. Additionally, attacking a barrier will no longer spend ammo. Instead, Symmetra will gain ammo, making her primary attack incredibly strong against barriers as it will ramp up quickly and never needs to be reloaded. Symmetra's secondary attack will fire out a large, rapidly moving energy orb that will explode on contact rather than piercing through multiple enemies like it did in previous versions. The charge up time to maximum takes 1 second, and the orb itself will deal 2 different kinds of damage. The first is an impact, and the second is an area of effect. The minimum for both of these is 8, and the maximum for both of these is 60. Her first ability, the Sentry Turret, is launched out as a special projectile. She can hold a maximum of 3 and can deploy a max of 3. Each turret has 30 hit points, can deal 50 damage per second, has a 30% slowing effect on the target that's being attacked, has a range of 10 meters, and each turret takes a full 10 seconds to recharge. Her next ability is the Teleporter, which is drastically different from its previous Ultimate version. It now has a 10-second duration with a 12-second cooldown, and it can be placed up to 25 meters away. An entrance gate will also appear directly in front of Symmetra at the same time. It has 50 normal health plus 250 rechargeable shield. If either one is destroyed, then both of them are removed. Traveling through the teleporter requires the player to press a special activation button. Other objects can go through the teleporter as well, more information on that later. Symmetra's ultimate is the Photon Barrier. When placed, it creates a gigantic barrier that cuts across the entire map. The orientation of this barrier can be changed by pressing the ultimate button again. The barrier functions just like all other barriers and will prevent enemy attacks from going through, but not the players themselves. The barrier has 5,000 health and a duration of 15 seconds. Now let's go over some tips for the character. Remember, Symmetra was moved out of support and into the damage category. While she still has a little bit of utility, her primary function is simply to do damage. And there's a couple of different ways that she can do this. Determining what attack to use depends on what type of enemy you're fighting. If it's a barrier, then you always want to use your primary attack beam, as it will not only do a tremendous amount of damage, it will also not need to be reloaded. Also, if the enemy is a high health target, your primary beam is also going to do the most damage. For standard enemies with 200 hit points or less, fully charged orbs are going to be your best bet. Also, against several enemies that are grouped up, you want to use fully charged orbs as the area of effect will hit all of them. At medium to long range or against fast moving targets, you're probably not going to do a whole lot of damage. The best thing you can do is kind of just poke with rapid fire orbs. Knowing this, there's a couple of different strategies you can use. As a frontline attacker, Symmetra is exceptional at destroying enemy barriers, because she can rapidly charge up her damage while never having to reload. However, she no longer has any defensive abilities anymore, so you'll need to have your own tanks to protect you. Reinhardt, Orisa, or something else that simply helps to keep you alive. Another strategy is to keep your distance and to use your secondary attack instead. If you're unable to stay in the front line because your team doesn't have a tank, or maybe the enemy team doesn't have any barriers that you need to destroy, then you can still do a tremendous amount of damage by staying a little bit further back and firing off a lot of fully charged secondary attacks. The energy orbs are projectiles, so there will be a travel time, but they still move quite fast and do a surprisingly large amount of damage. Remember, the secondary attack deals damage in two ways. Half of it is impact, and the other half is area of effect. Whenever there are multiple enemies grouped up, you always will do more damage with your secondary attack. The final strategy is that of a flanker. You can use your teleporter and put yourself in a position behind the enemy main line and attack the enemy supports. As soon as you start taking too much damage, you can quickly disengage by retreating back through your own teleporter. A really good damage combo, particularly against an unsuspecting enemy, is to fully charge up your right click and release it at close range. They'll take a huge amount of damage, and then you can easily finish them off with your left click. The mini sentries are great at providing additional damage and preventing enemy movement. During a fight, always throw out a few turrets above and behind the enemy. This will force them to waste time turning around to deal with the turret, leaving them open to your primary attack, and more importantly, preventing them from attacking you. Or if they choose to ignore it and just try to focus on you, they'll take a constant 50 damage per second from the mini turrets that are behind them. The mini sentries are also an excellent way of preventing enemies from running away. The slowing effect is quite substantial, allowing you to easily catch up, while at the same time dealing quite a bit of damage. The teleporter can be an excellent way to initiate a fight or retreat from one. However, it requires a bit of setup time. You should think of it in the same way that you would Sombra's translocator. It needs to be prepared before you actually need to use it. If you attempt to use the teleporter like you would Tracer's Recall or Reaper's Wraith form, then it's simply not going to be effective and you're going to end up having a bad time. You should always have it ready and set up before you need to use it. The teleporter also gives an incredible amount of vertical mobility to other characters that normally would not have any. Characters like Reinhardt and Orisa can quickly be teleported up to high ground where they will have a significant advantage. If the rest of the team goes up with them, then it becomes an incredibly strong point of attack or defense. The teleporter also allows Torbjorn to set up his turret in places where he normally would never be able to get to. This has the benefit of allowing for a lot more variety in the location placement, but it can also hinder Torbjorn from being able to repair it in some cases. Additionally, a bastion can be used in the same way. As I mentioned earlier, players must press an activation button to use the teleporter. However, you don't have to press it the moment you touch the teleporter. Instead, a handy trick is to simply hold down the button and the teleport will activate the instant you step on it. This is particularly useful when trying to combine the teleporter usage with things like Reinhardt's charge. The Photon Barrier ultimate is far more powerful than many would believe. In fact, it's likely going to be one of the most powerful underused abilities in the game. It has a relatively fast charge time, a long duration, and extremely high health. This means it can be used quite often and effectively. It's good for protecting your team against most enemy damaging ultimates. In fact, it's the only defensive ult strong enough to protect your team from Pharah's barrage. It's also excellent against soldiers, McCree's, or D.Va's ultimate. But it should not be used only to protect against enemy ultimates. Because it does charge so quickly, it can be used in many situations to simply prevent long-range enemy damage. Characters like Widow, Hanzo, Soldier, McCree, Junkrat, and more will get completely shut down by the Photon Barrier. This provides a pocket of the map that is immune to nearly all long-range damage. Those players will then be forced to put themselves in a more vulnerable position in order to continue their attack, or they simply won't do any damage for the duration of the ultimate. Using the Photon Barrier to cut a capture point in half is also incredibly powerful. It allows more vulnerable teammates to use the barrier as a way of avoiding certain kinds of enemies. Your teammates can move back and forth between the two sides of the barrier and keep it between them and whoever is trying to get them. This is particularly useful against characters like Tracer and Genji. The last thing to mention is how Symmetra's abilities will interact with other characters. What sort of things can go through the teleporter? How does Deflect and Defense Matrix work against Symmetra? Well, you're in luck, because I already made a video that goes through every single interaction with Symmetra. There'll be a link to that on screen and down below. So if you want to know how all of that works, you can go and check it out. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter. The links for that stuff are down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.